The dust devil that tore through Emma Richardson's vegetable patch on that scorching August morning in 1882 seemed like the final insult from a god who had already taken everything else from her. But she squared her shoulders and picked up her hoe as if nothing had happened, refusing to let anyone in Silver Creek, Arizona territory, see her break. Her husband Thomas had been dead for 3 months now, killed when his horse threw him during a routine ride to check the fence lines on their small homestead. The doctor said his neck had snapped instantly, a mercy perhaps, but Emma felt no mercy in the weeks that followed. She had buried him on a hillside overlooking the property they had worked so hard to build together, and then she had returned to the cabin alone, 24 years old and suddenly responsible for keeping everything afloat by herself. The crops were failing. The well was running low. The few cattle they owned had wandered off during a storm, and Emma lacked the strength to round them up alone. Her savings, meager to begin with, had dwindled to almost nothing after paying off Thomas's outstanding debts at the general store. She wore the same 2 dresses in rotation, both now faded and patched at the elbows, and she had taken to eating 1 meal a day to stretch her dwindling supplies. Still, when Martha Henderson from the neighboring property came by with a basket of bread and preserves, Emma had thanked her politely and sent her away with most of it, claiming she had plenty. When Reverend Cotton stopped by after Sunday service to ask if she needed anything, she had smiled and assured him that she was managing just fine. When the banker, Mr. Thornton, had suggested she might consider selling the property and moving back east to live with relatives, she had looked him dead in the eye and told him she had no intention of going anywhere. Pride was all Emma had left, and she wore it like armor. She did not notice the cowboy at first. Cole Brennan had been working at the massive Anchor Ranch for 2 years, ever since drifting into the territory from Texas with nothing but his horse, his saddle, and a past he preferred not to discuss. He was 28, lean and weathered from years of working cattle under the brutal southwestern sun, with dark hair that fell past his collar and gray eyes that seemed to take in everything without judgment. He had seen Emma in town a few times, always walking with her spine straight and her chin up, even as her dresses grew more worn and her face grew thinner. He had watched her haggle for supplies at the general store, counting out her coins carefully, putting back items when she realized she could not afford them. He had seen her hands, rough and blistered from work that no woman should have to do alone, and he had seen the determined set of her jaw that said she would accept no sympathy. Cole understood pride. He had lived on it himself during harder times than he cared to remember. He knew that sometimes the kindest thing you could do for someone was to help them without making them feel small for needing it, so he started leaving things at her door. The first time, it was a sack of cornmeal and some salt pork. He rode out to her property in the early hours before dawn, when the world was still dark and the only sounds were the distant howl of coyotes and the soft thud of his horses' hooves on the packed earth. He left the supplies on her doorstep, carefully wrapped and tied, and then he rode away before the sun could rise and reveal him. Emma found the package when she opened her door to fetch water from the well. She stood there for a long moment, staring down at the supplies, her throat tight. Her first instinct was anger. She did not want charity. She did not want anyone thinking she could not take care of herself. But her stomach was empty and her pantry was bare, and she was not foolish enough to refuse food when she desperately needed it. She looked around, trying to see who might have left it, but the landscape was empty in every direction. The mysterious benefactor had vanished like morning mist. Emma brought the supplies inside and tried to tell herself it was a one-time occurrence, probably from someone at church who meant well. She would use what she needed and somehow find a way to repay the kindness when her circumstances improved. But 3 days later there was more. This time it was a side of bacon, a bag of dried beans, and a small sack of coffee. Again, it appeared before dawn, left carefully on her doorstep without a note or any indication of who had brought it. Emma felt tears sting her eyes as she carried the supplies inside. Coffee. She had not had real coffee in weeks, making do with roasted grain that tasted like dirt. Whoever was doing this knew what she needed, understood the small luxuries that could make unbearable days slightly more bearable. She sat at her small kitchen table and poured herself a cup of the real coffee, inhaling the rich aroma, and allowed herself exactly 1 minute to feel grateful before she forced herself back to the endless work that filled her days. Cole continued his silent deliveries. A week later, he left a bundle of firewood already chopped and split. Then came a bag of flour and another of sugar. He brought rope when he noticed her clothesline had broken, and nails when he saw her fence sagging. He never left a note, he never waited to be thanked. He simply left what he thought she needed and rode away in the darkness. He told himself he was doing it out of simple Christian charity, that he would do the same for any neighbor in need. But the truth was more complicated than that. There was something about Emma Richardson's fierce independence that called to something deep inside him. She reminded him of a wild Mustang he had once seen, trapped in a canyon with a broken leg, still refusing to surrender even when death seemed certain. That horse had fought with everything it had, and somehow, impossibly, it had survived. Emma was fighting the same way, and Cole found himself wanting to see her win. The problem was that Emma was starting to notice the pattern. Supplies appeared like clockwork, always before dawn, always exactly what she needed. Someone was watching her, paying attention to her circumstances, and the realization made her feel exposed and vulnerable in a way she had not felt since Thomas died. She began staying up at night, sitting by her window with a lamp turned low, determined to catch her mysterious benefactor. But exhaustion always claimed her before dawn, and she would wake to find herself slumped over the table, another package waiting outside, mocking her attempts at vigilance. It was driving her mad. She needed to know who was doing this so she could put a stop to it. She was not some charity case to be pitied. She was managing. She was surviving. She did not need anyone's help, except she did. Deep down, in a place she refused to acknowledge even to herself, she knew she was barely holding on. Without those supplies, she would have already lost the homestead. Without that help, she might not have made it through the summer at all. The internal battle between her pride and her reality was tearing her apart. Cole noticed the lamp burning in her window one night as he approached with a bundle of supplies. He reined in his horse 100 yards from the cabin and sat there in the darkness, watching the golden square of light. She was waiting up, trying to catch him. The realization made him smile despite himself. She was stubborn, he would give her that. He waited for over an hour, patient as stone, until finally the light dimmed and went out. He waited another 30 minutes to be sure, then rode forward and left his delivery. This time it was a smoked ham and a bag of apples, small and tart, from a tree on the ranch property. As he rode away, he found himself wondering what Emma Richardson looked like when she smiled. He had only ever seen her in town wearing that mask of determined composure, never a hint of joy or ease. What would it take to make those stern lips curve upward, to bring light to those somber eyes? The thought occupied him more than it should have as he rode back to the Anchor Ranch and his narrow bunk in the Cowboy's quarters. The summer dragged on, brutal and unforgiving. Temperatures soared above 100 degrees for days at a time. The creek that ran through Emma's property dried to a trickle, and she had to haul every drop of water from her well by hand. Her vegetable garden, despite her best efforts, produced only a fraction of what she needed. The heat was relentless, oppressive, draining her strength and her spirit. But the supplies kept coming. Emma found herself falling into an uneasy acceptance of the arrangement. She still hated that she needed help, still felt her pride chafing against the reality of her dependence, but she stopped staying up to catch her benefactor. What would be the point? If she discovered who it was, she would have to confront them, thank them, acknowledge her weakness. As long as the arrangement remained anonymous, she could tell herself it was different somehow, that it did not count as charity if she did not know who to feel indebted to. It was a lie, but it was one she could live with. What she did not expect was to start feeling curious about the person behind the gifts. The supplies were always practical, always thoughtful. Whoever was leaving them understood the life she was living, understood what it took to survive on a failing homestead in the Arizona desert. That suggested someone with experience, someone who had struggled themselves. She found herself imagining different scenarios. Maybe it was old Mr. Jenkins from the feed store, who had always been kind to her and Thomas. Maybe it was one of the ranch hands from the Anchor spread, acting on orders from the wealthy owner who probably saw helping poor neighbors as a kind of feudal obligation. Maybe it was even a woman, someone like Martha Henderson, who was simply being discreet about offering help. It never occurred to her that it might be someone who was watching her for reasons that had nothing to do with duty or obligation. Cole's interest in Emma's welfare was becoming something he could no longer ignore or explain away. He found himself thinking about her at odd moments during the day, wondering if she had found the supplies he left, if they had been what she needed, if she was managing to hold on. He started paying closer attention when he was in town, listening to gossip about her situation, learning what he could. What he learned made him angry. The banker, Thornton, was apparently pressuring her to sell, coming by her property every few weeks with increasingly aggressive offers. Some of the townspeople had taken to whispering about her, suggesting it was unseemly for a young widow to be living alone, implying that she should give up her independence and seek the protection of a new husband. There were even a few men, emboldened by whiskey and stupidity, who had suggested they would be willing to take on the burden of a broke widow with a failing homestead. The disrespect of it made Cole's jaw clench. Emma Richardson was holding onto her dignity and her independence with nothing but sheer will. And instead of admiring that, people were circling like vultures, waiting for her to fall so they could pick over what remained. He decided to do more than leave supplies. He started doing work around her property in the hours before dawn, fixing things she could not manage alone. He repaired the sagging fence, replaced broken boards on her small barn, reinforced the well cover that had been coming loose. He worked quickly and quietly, always gone before the sun could reveal him, leaving no trace except the improvements themselves. Emma noticed, of course. She would walk out to discover her fence repaired, her barn door hanging straight again, her chicken coop reinforced against predators. It was both infuriating and deeply touching. Whoever was doing this was not just keeping her fed. They were actively trying to help her keep her home, to maintain what she and Thomas had built together. The realization brought tears to her eyes more than once, though she always blinked them away angrily and got back to work. September arrived with a slight cooling of the temperatures, and the first real hope Emma had felt since Thomas died. Her chickens were laying well, providing eggs she could eat or sell. The repairs to her property had stabilized things enough that she felt less like she was in constant crisis mode. She even managed to sell some of the eggs and a few preserves she had made to earn a little cash, which she immediately spent on seed for a fall planting. She was still poor, still struggling, still alone, but she was surviving. She was holding on, and then everything changed. It was a Saturday morning when Emma went into town for supplies. She had a careful list prepared and exact change counted out. She needed thread to mend her dresses, a few essentials from the general store, and she wanted to stop by the feed store to ask about purchasing a young pig on credit. If she could raise a pig through the winter, she would have meat for months. She walked into the general store with her head high, greeted Mrs. Patterson, who ran the place with her husband, and began gathering her few items. She was at the counter, counting out her coins, when she became aware of a presence behind her. Mrs. Richardson. She turned to find Cole Brennan standing there, hat in his hands, his gray eyes steady on hers. She had seen him around town before, knew he worked at the Anchor Ranch, but they had never spoken. Up close, she realized he was younger than she had thought, probably only a few years older than herself, and there was something in his weathered face that spoke of hard experience. "Mr. Brennan," she said carefully, uncertain why he was approaching her. "I hope you do not mind my speaking to you," he said, his voice quiet and deeper than she expected. "I wanted to ask if you might be willing to sell a few dozen eggs to the Anchor Ranch. Our cook is always complaining about the quality of what we get from the usual supplier, and I mentioned that I had heard yours were better." Emma blinked, caught off guard. Yes, I suppose I could. How many would you need?" 3 dozen a week, if you can manage it." "I can pay you 50 cents a dozen. Pick them up from your place every Saturday morning so you do not have to bring them in." 50 cents a dozen was robbery, but in Emma's favor. The going rate was closer to 30 cents. She should have been suspicious, but the offer of $1.50 a week was too good to question too closely. That was real money, steady money. "That would be acceptable," she said, keeping her voice level even as her heart raced. "I can have them ready by Saturday." "This Saturday works," Cole said. "I will be by mid-morning if that suits you." "It does. Thank you, Mr. Brennan." He nodded, settled his hat back on his head and left the store, leaving Emma standing there wondering what had just happened. Mrs. Patterson was giving her a knowing look from behind the counter. "That Cole Brennan is a good man," she said. "Quiet, keeps to himself mostly, but he is fair and honest. The Anchor Ranch is lucky to have him." Emma just nodded and finished her transaction, her mind spinning. 50 cents a dozen. It was too much, which meant it was probably charity disguised as business. She should have refused. She should have called him back and negotiated a fair price, but she needed the money too desperately to let pride get in the way. Saturday morning arrived with brilliant sunshine and temperatures that were almost pleasant for the first time in months. Emma had gathered 3 dozen of her best eggs, packing them carefully in straw-lined crates. She had also, though she told herself it was foolish, changed into her better dress and pinned up her hair more carefully than usual. She was not trying to impress anyone. She was simply conducting business and wanted to look professional. That was all. Cole arrived exactly when he said he would, riding up to her cabin on a sturdy bay horse. He dismounted with an easy grace and approached her porch, where she waited with the egg crates. "Morning, Mrs. Richardson," he said, touching his hat brim. "Good morning, Mr. Brennan." She gestured to the crates. 3 dozen, as agreed. He inspected them briefly, then pulled out a small leather pouch and counted out $1.50 in coins, placing them carefully in her palm. His fingers brushed hers for just a moment, calloused and warm, and Emma felt an unexpected jolt at the contact. "These look perfect," he said. "The cook will be pleased." "I do my best to keep my chickens healthy and well-fed," Emma said, then immediately felt foolish for explaining something so obvious. Cole seemed about to say something else, but then he just nodded, loaded the crates onto his horse with practiced efficiency, and prepared to leave. Emma watched him and on impulse heard herself speaking before she could think better of it. "Mr. Brennan, would you like a cup of coffee before you ride back? It is a long way to the Anchor Ranch in this heat." He turned back to her, and for a moment, something flickered in those gray eyes. Surprise, maybe, or pleasure. "I would like that, ma'am. Thank you." Emma led him into her cabin, suddenly acutely aware of how shabby everything was. The furniture was handmade and rough, the curtains were faded, the whole place was barely bigger than some people's kitchens. But it was clean, obsessively so, and Cole did not seem to judge as he removed his hat and took the seat she offered at her small table. She poured coffee for both of them, using the precious supply that had mysteriously appeared on her doorstep weeks ago. The irony was not lost on her. "You have a nice place here," Cole said, looking around. "Good land, good water, your husband built well." The mention of Thomas created a moment of awkward silence. Emma sat down across from him, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. He did. Thomas was a good man, a hard worker. He loved this land. "I am sorry for your loss," Cole said quietly. "It cannot be easy managing alone. There it was, the sympathy she hated, the acknowledgement of her weakness. Emma felt her spine stiffen. "I am managing just fine, Mr. Brennan. I do not need anyone's pity." "I do not pity you," Cole said, meeting her eyes directly. "I respect you. What you are doing here, holding onto this place by yourself, that takes more strength than most people have. I have seen grown men give up for less." The words caught her completely off guard. Emma stared at him, searching his face for signs of mockery or condescension, but found only honesty. He meant what he said. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice softer. "That is kind of you to say." They drank their coffee in a silence that was not quite comfortable but not hostile either. Emma found herself studying him covertly. He had strong hands, scarred and weathered from years of hard work. His face was tanned to leather, with fine lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun. There was a scar along his jawline, old and faded. He looked like a man who had lived hard and survived it. "How long have you been at the Anchor Ranch?" she asked, more to fill the silence than out of real curiosity. "About 2 years now. I came up from Texas, wanted to see more of the territory. Do you like it here?" Cole considered the question. "It is good country. Harsh but honest. I appreciate that." Emma found herself smiling slightly. Harsh but honest, that is a good way to describe Arizona. "It is a good way to describe a lot of things," Cole said, and there was something in his tone that made Emma think he was talking about more than just the landscape. He finished his coffee and stood, clearly not wanting to overstay his welcome. "Thank you for the coffee, Mrs. Richardson. I will be back next Saturday for more eggs if that still suits you." "It does," Emma said, walking him to the door. "I will have them ready." He mounted his horse, settled the egg crates carefully, then looked down at her. "If you ever need anything, any help around the place, you can send word to the ranch. I am handy with repairs and such." Emma felt her pride bristle again. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Brennan, but I can handle my own repairs." Something flickered across his face, gone too quickly to read. "I am sure you can, ma'am. The offer stands all the same." He rode away, and Emma stood watching until he disappeared over the rise, feeling strangely unsettled. There had been something in his eyes when she refused his help, a look she could not quite interpret. Almost like he had expected her to refuse, but had hoped she would not. That night, lying in her narrow bed, Emma found herself thinking about Cole Brennan's hands and the way he had looked at her property with appreciation rather than pity. She thought about his words, that he respected her, that what she was doing took strength. No one had spoken to her that way since Thomas died. Everyone else treated her like she was broken, like she was one strong wind away from complete collapse. Cole had looked at her like she was capable, like she was strong. She fell asleep thinking about gray eyes and calloused fingers brushing against her palm. The egg deliveries became a weekly routine. Every Saturday, Cole arrived mid-morning, paid for his 3 dozen eggs, and accepted Emma's offer of coffee. They would sit at her small table and talk, carefully at first, then with increasing ease as the weeks passed. Emma learned that Cole had grown up on a small ranch in Texas, that his parents had died of fever when he was 16, that he had spent the years since then working his way across the Southwest, never staying anywhere too long. "Why not settle down somewhere?" Emma asked one morning. "You obviously know ranching. You could stake a claim, start building something of your own." Cole was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "I suppose I have never felt I belonged anywhere enough to put down roots. Always felt like I was meant to keep moving." "That sounds lonely," Emma said softly. "It can be," Cole admitted. "But it is also simple. No ties, no obligations, no one to let down." Emma understood that philosophy better than she wanted to admit. There was a safety in isolation, in depending only on yourself. But there was also a hollowness to it, an emptiness that gnawed at you in the quiet hours. "Is that what you want?" she asked. "To keep moving forever?" Cole looked at her, really looked at her, and Emma felt her breath catch at the intensity in his gaze. "I am starting to think maybe not," he said quietly. "I am starting to think maybe there are reasons to stay." The air between them suddenly felt charged, heavy with unspoken meaning. Emma looked away first, her heart beating too fast, uncertain what to do with the feelings rising in her chest. "More coffee?" she asked, standing up abruptly. "No, thank you, I should get back." Cole stood as well, but he did not move toward the door. "Emma." It was the first time he had used her given name. The sound of it in his voice did something strange to her insides. "Yes." "I want you to know something." He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "If you ever need help, real help, I hope you will come to me, not because I pity you, but because I care what happens to you." Emma felt her throat tighten. "Cole, You do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know, you are not as alone as you think you are." He left then, and Emma stood in her doorway watching him ride away, her emotions in complete turmoil. She was not ready for this. She had loved Thomas, mourned him, and she was not ready to feel anything for another man. It was too soon, too complicated, too frightening, but she could not deny what she was feeling. Cole Brennan had somehow slipped past her defenses, and she did not know what to do about it. The supplies kept appearing at her door, and for the first time, Emma thought she knew who was leaving them. The realization should have made her angry. She had been accepting help from Cole for months without knowing it, letting him support her while she clung to her pride and insisted she needed nothing from anyone. But instead of anger, she felt something warmer, something that terrified her in its intensity. He had been helping her all this time, asking nothing in return, expecting no gratitude or acknowledgement. He had simply seen what she needed and provided it, as quietly and unobtrusively as possible, respecting her pride even as he worked around it. It was perhaps the kindest thing anyone had ever done for her. Emma began to watch for him differently after that. The Saturday morning visits became the highlight of her week. She found herself looking forward to their conversations, to the way he listened when she spoke, to the rare smiles that softened his weathered face. She started taking more care with her appearance on Saturdays, telling herself it was foolish even as she did it. She was falling for him. Despite every intention to remain alone and independent, despite her determination not to need anyone, she was falling for Cole Brennan. The realization came fully one October morning when she saw him riding up her path and felt her heart leap with pure joy. This was more than gratitude for his help. This was more than appreciation for his respect. This was the beginning of something real, something that could grow into love if she let it. The question was whether she was brave enough to let it. Cole had his own internal battle raging. He had not planned on falling for Emma Richardson. He had simply wanted to help a neighbor in need, to do the right thing in a world that often made doing right difficult. But somewhere along the way, her fierce independence and quiet strength had captured him completely. He looked forward to Saturday mornings with an intensity that alarmed him. He found himself thinking about her constantly, wondering if she had enough firewood, if her chickens were laying well, if she was managing to get enough food. He wanted to tell her the truth about the supplies, wanted to confess that he had been leaving them all along. But he was terrified that if he did, she would be angry, that she would feel he had tricked her into accepting his help. Worse, he feared she would stop taking what she needed, would let pride starve her rather than accept charity from him. So he continued the charade, leaving supplies in the dark hours before dawn, then showing up on Saturday mornings as if he knew nothing about it. The deception gnawed at him, but the alternative seemed worse. Things came to a head on a cold November morning when Cole arrived for his weekly egg pickup and found Emma's door standing open and no sign of her anywhere. He felt immediate alarm. Emma was too careful to leave her door open in the cold. Something was wrong. "Emma," he called, dismounting quickly and approaching the cabin. "Emma, are you here?" He heard a faint sound from inside, something between a gasp and a sob. He stepped through the door and found her sitting on the floor by her fireplace, her face flushed with fever, shivering despite the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "Emma, my God." He was kneeling beside her in an instant, pressing his hand to her forehead. She was burning up. How long have you been sick? Few days, she mumbled, her eyes glassy and unfocused. Could not get up this morning, so cold. Cole looked around the cabin quickly, his mind racing through what needed to be done. The fire had burned down to embers, she had no water, no food within reach. She had clearly been suffering alone, too proud or too sick to send for help. I am going to take care of you, he said firmly, already moving to rebuild the fire. No arguments, Emma, you are too sick to fight me on this. She did not argue, which told him how bad off she really was. He got the fire blazing again, then scooped her up and placed her in her bed, piling every blanket he could find over her. She was so light in his arms, too light, and the realization of how little she had been eating made him angry all over again at a world that let people suffer like this. He spent the next hour making her cabin livable again, hauling water, preparing a simple broth from supplies he found in her pantry, feeding her small spoonfuls when she would take them. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes mumbling things he could not understand. Once she called out for Thomas, and Cole felt his heart twist. He could not leave her like this. He rode to the nearest neighbor and explained that Mrs. Richardson was sick and he would be staying to care for her, asking them to send word to the Anchor Ranch that he would not be back for a few days. Then he returned to Emma's cabin and settled in for what he knew would be a long vigil. Emma was sick for 3 days. Cole barely left her side, feeding her broth and water, keeping her warm, bathing her face with cool cloths when the fever raged highest. He slept in the chair beside her bed, dozing fitfully, waking at every sound she made. On the 3rd night, the fever finally broke. Emma woke in the early hours before dawn, clear-headed for the first time in days, and found Cole asleep in the chair beside her, his head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, dark circles under his eyes. She watched him sleep and felt her heart break open. He had stayed. He had cared for her when she was helpless, when she could not maintain her pride or her independence. He had seen her at her absolute worst and had not left. "Cole," she whispered. His eyes opened immediately, going from sleep to alertness in an instant. "Emma, how do you feel?" "Better." "Weak, but better." She struggled to sit up, and he was there immediately, helping her, propping pillows behind her. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed. Did you think I would leave you sick and alone?" Emma felt tears welling up, hot and unstoppable. "You should not have. You have work. You have obligations. Nothing more important than making sure you were all right." He brushed a strand of hair back from her face with a gentleness that made her want to cry harder. "Emma, you scared the life out of me. If I had not come by when I did—" "I know," her voice broke, "I know. I am sorry. I did not want to bother anyone. I thought I could manage." "You do not always have to manage alone," Cole said softly. "You do not have to be strong every minute of every day. It is all right to need help sometimes." "I am not good at needing help," Emma admitted, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I do not know how to be weak." "You are not weak. You are human. There is a difference." Cole took her hand, his rough fingers wrapping around hers. "Emma, I need to tell you something." She saw the tension in his face, the uncertainty, and her heart began to pound. "What is it?" "The supplies that have been appearing at your door, the repairs around your property, that has all been me." The words came out in a rush. "I have been leaving them for months now, since the summer. I know you did not want charity, and I know you value your independence, but I could not stand by and watch you struggle when I could help. I am sorry if you feel I deceived you, but I am not sorry I did it." Emma stared at him, processing this confirmation of what she had already suspected. She should have been angry, she should have felt humiliated. But looking at his face, seeing the genuine concern and care written in every line, she felt only overwhelming gratitude and something deeper, something she had been afraid to name. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why did you do all that for me?" Cole met her eyes, and the raw honesty in his gaze took her breath away. "Because I could not stand the thought of you suffering. Because I admired your strength too much to let circumstances break you. Because from the first time I saw you in town, holding your head high despite everything, I felt something I had not felt in years, maybe ever." "What did you feel?" that I had found something worth staying for, someone worth staying for. He paused, then continued, his voice low and intense. I am falling in love with you, Emma. Maybe I already have fallen. I know it is too soon. I know you are still mourning your husband, and I am not asking you to feel the same way, but I needed you to know the truth. All of it. Emma felt her world tilting, realigning around this moment. Her pride wanted to protest, wanted to insist she did not need his love or his help. But her heart, her bruised and battered heart, was singing. It is not too soon, she whispered. I thought it was. I thought it should be, but Cole, you have been the only bright thing in my life for months now. You have seen me at my worst and you did not turn away. You have respected my strength and supported my weakness. I do not know when it happened, but I am falling for you too. Maybe I have been falling since that first cup of coffee. Cole's face transformed with hope and joy. Emma. I am still scared, she admitted. I am still not good at needing people. I am still going to be stubborn and proud and difficult. I know, he said, and he was smiling now, really smiling. I would not want you any other way. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted to. Emma did not want to. She closed her eyes and met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home after a long journey. The kiss was gentle, careful, full of promise and possibility. When they pulled apart, Emma was crying again, but this time they were tears of relief and happiness. What do we do now? Now you rest and get your strength back, Cole said practically. Then we figure out the rest as we go, together if you will have me. Together, Emma agreed. I like the sound of that. Cole stayed for another 2 days until he was certain Emma was truly recovering. During that time, they talked for hours, sharing stories about their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Emma told him about Thomas, about their love and their dreams for the homestead. And she cried without shame because Cole held her and understood that she could mourn what she lost while still embracing what she had found. Cole told her about his years of drifting, about the loneliness that had driven him from place to place, never feeling like he belonged anywhere. But I belong here, he said, looking around her small cabin. With you, I belong. When Cole finally returned to the Anchor Ranch, it was with the understanding that he would be back every chance he got. He spoke to his foreman, explaining that he was courting Emma Richardson and would need time to help her with her property. The foreman, a gruff older man named Hank, just grunted and said, "About time you settled down. That woman needs a good man, and you need something to work for besides a paycheck." Emma recovered her strength slowly, but with Cole's help, the homestead began to thrive in ways it had not since Thomas died. Cole came by 3 or 4 times a week, often staying late into the evening to help with heavy work she could not manage alone. He repaired the barn properly, reinforced her fences, helped her bring in firewood for winter. She insisted on paying him with meals, and they would sit together at her table, eating and talking and laughing in ways Emma had forgotten were possible. The town noticed, of course. People talked about the Anchor Cowboy who was courting the Richardson widow. Some of the talk was kind, but some was not. There were whispers that Emma had not mourned long enough, that she was being unseemly. The banker, Thornton, made snide comments about how convenient it was that she had found a man to help her keep her property. Emma heard the talk and refused to care. Let them gossip. She had spent months suffering in silence to preserve some arbitrary standard of propriety, and where had it gotten her? Nearly dead from illness and pride. She was done living for the approval of people who had done nothing to help her when she needed it. Cole was more bothered by the gossip, but Emma would not let him brood about it. "People will always talk," she said one evening as they sat together on her porch, watching the sun set over the desert. "We cannot control what they think. We can only live our lives the best way we know how." "You are wiser than I am," Cole said, taking her hand. "No, I am just tired of caring what people think. Life is too short and too hard to waste on that kind of worry." As winter settled over Arizona territory, Emma and Cole's relationship deepened. They were careful about propriety. with Cole never staying past dark and always making sure neighbors knew he was there to help with the property. But anyone who saw them together could see the love growing between them, the way they moved around each other with increasing ease, the way their eyes met and held. Emma had not thought she would ever feel this way again. Thomas had been her first love, her childhood sweetheart, and she had assumed that was her one chance at happiness. But what she was building with Cole was different from what she had with Thomas. Thomas had been safety and familiarity. Cole was passion and partnership, a meeting of equals who chose each other fully aware of what they were both risking. One December evening, as they sat by her fireplace after a long day of work, Cole turned to her with unusual nervousness. "I have been thinking," he said, "about the future." "About us?" Emma's heart began to pound. "What about us?" "I want to marry you, Emma. I want to make this official, make us a real family. I want to wake up in this cabin every morning and go to sleep here every night. I want to help you build this homestead into something strong and lasting. I want children with you, a life with you, everything." He paused, then added, "But I will not ask unless you are ready. I know this is still new. I know you need time." Emma looked at him. This man who had saved her life in so many ways, who had respected her strength and forgiven her weakness, who made her laugh and feel alive again. She thought about Thomas, about the life they had built and the love they had shared, and she knew without doubt that he would want her to be happy. He would not want her to spend the rest of her life alone out of some misguided sense of loyalty to his memory. "Ask me," she said softly. Cole's eyes widened. "What? Ask me, Cole. I am ready." He slid off his chair and knelt on the floor in front of her, taking both her hands in his. "Emma Richardson, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and working beside you and building something good and true? Will you be my wife?" "Yes," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you." Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, and Emma felt the last walls around her heart crumble. She had been so afraid of needing someone, so terrified of being vulnerable, but this was right. This was what life was supposed to be. They were married in January of 1883 in a simple ceremony at the small church in Silver Creek. Emma wore a new dress that Cole had bought her, pale blue cotton that made her eyes shine. Cole wore his best clothes, his dark hair neatly trimmed for once, looking nervous and proud all at once. The church was full of people from town and several hands from the Anchor Ranch, all come to witness the union. Martha Henderson cried through the whole ceremony. Even gruff old Hank from the ranch looked suspiciously misty-eyed as Cole and Emma exchanged their vows. When Reverend Cotton pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed Emma with a tenderness that made her knees weak, and the congregation erupted in applause and cheers. Emma laughed against his mouth, overwhelmed with happiness, scarcely able to believe that this was real, that she got to have this. The reception was held at the town hall, with food brought by half the town and music provided by a fiddler from the Anchor Ranch. Emma danced with her new husband, surrounded by well-wishers, and felt like she was floating. This was so different from her wedding to Thomas, which had been quiet and simple, just two young people full of hopes and dreams. This felt like a celebration of survival as much as love, a testament to the fact that good things could come after tragedy if you were brave enough to reach for them. Cole could not stop smiling. He danced with Emma again and again, holding her close, whispering things in her ear that made her blush and laugh. "I love you, Mrs. Brennan," he said. "I am going to spend every day proving you made the right choice." "I already know I did," Emma said, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "You are the best man I have ever known, Cole Brennan." They spent their wedding night in Emma's cabin, which was now their cabin. Cole carried her over the threshold, a tradition that made them both laugh, and then they stood together in the firelight, suddenly shy despite months of growing intimacy. "Are you nervous?" Cole asked softly. "A little," Emma admitted. "Are you?" "Terrified," he said with a slight smile. "I want to get this right, Emma. I want to make you happy." She stepped closer, resting her hands on his chest. "You already make me happy. Just be yourself. That is all I need." They took their time, exploring this new aspect of their relationship with gentleness and care. Cole was patient and tender, and Emma felt herself letting go of the last of her fears and reservations. This was her husband, her partner, the man she loved. She could be vulnerable with him. She could be fully herself. Afterward, they lay tangled together in her small bed, and Emma traced the scars on Cole's chest and arms, learning the map of his body. "Tell me about these," she said softly. He told her stories about his years of drifting, about bar fights and cattle stampedes, about falls from horses and encounters with angry ranchers. Each scar was a memory, a moment when he had survived something that could have killed him. "I am glad you survived," Emma whispered. "I am glad you made it here to me." "So am I," Cole said, pulling her closer. "You are what I have been moving toward my whole life. I just did not know it until I found you." The winter passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Cole moved his few belongings into the cabin and began the process of truly making the homestead his home. He brought expertise and muscle that transformed the property, and Emma brought knowledge of the land and fierce determination. Together, they were stronger than either had been alone. They worked side by side every day, building and repairing and planning. Cole negotiated with the Anchor Ranch to reduce his hours, explaining that he needed time to work his own property. The owner, a distant businessman who rarely visited, agreed readily, and Hank arranged a schedule that allowed Cole to work 3 days a week at the ranch for steady pay while devoting the rest of his time to the homestead. The egg money continued to come in, and Emma started selling preserves and butter in town as well. Slowly, painfully slowly, their financial situation began to stabilize. They were still poor by any measure, still struggling to make ends meet, but they were no longer in constant crisis. They were building something sustainable. Emma found herself happier than she had been in longer than she could remember. She had loved Thomas, but their life together had been marked by constant worry and struggle, by the sense that they were always one disaster away from losing everything. With Cole, she felt secure in a way she never had before. Not because they had more money or an easier life, but because they faced everything together. She was not alone anymore, and neither was he. Cole was equally transformed. The restlessness that had driven him for years was gone, replaced by contentment and purpose. He woke up every morning in the cabin he now thought of as home, with Emma warm beside him, and felt like the luckiest man alive. He had never expected to have this, a wife and a home and a future. He had thought he would drift until he died, never belonging anywhere. Instead, he had found everything he did not know he needed. Spring brought new challenges and new joys. The vegetable garden flourished under their combined care, producing more than they could eat. Emma started preserving and selling the excess. Their chickens multiplied, and soon they had enough eggs to expand their sales. Cole bought a young pig, just as Emma had hoped to do before she got sick, and they raised it through the spring and summer, planning to butcher it in the fall. In April, Emma realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but had not wanted to say anything until she was certain. When she finally told Cole, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Emma asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Cole said, setting her down gently and placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "This is everything, Emma. You are everything." The pregnancy was not easy. Emma was sick for months, struggling to keep food down, exhausted all the time. But Cole was endlessly patient, taking over more of the work around the homestead, making sure she rested, holding her hair back when she was sick, and never complaining. He had become the support she had been too proud to accept before, and Emma finally understood that letting him help her was not weakness. It was love. As her belly grew through the summer, they prepared for the baby's arrival. Cole built a cradle from wood he cut himself, sanding it smooth and carving simple designs into the headboard. Emma sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands moving with practiced skill. They talked endlessly about names and the future, about what kind of parents they wanted to be. "I want our children to know they are loved," Emma said one evening as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset. "I want them to grow up feeling secure and safe." "They will," Cole promised, his hand resting on her swollen belly. "We will make sure of it." The baby came in late November, a cold night with stars blazing overhead. Emma's labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Cole was terrified he would lose her. But she was strong, stronger than he had ever seen anyone be, and when the midwife from town finally placed a squalling, red-faced infant in Emma's arms, Cole felt tears streaming down his face. "A boy," the midwife announced. "A healthy boy." Emma looked down at her son with wonder, then up at Cole with exhausted joy. "We have a son." Cole knelt beside the bed, looking at his child for the first time. The baby had a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air as he cried. He was perfect. He was theirs. "What should we name him?" Emma asked softly. They had discussed names, but suddenly Cole knew what he wanted. "Thomas," he said. "For your first husband, he built this place, made it possible for us to be here. Our son should carry his name." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" "Cole, you do not have to, I am sure," Cole said firmly. "Thomas Richardson was a good man who loved you and worked hard to build something lasting. I want our son to know about him, to carry on that legacy. It feels right." "Thomas Cole Brennan," Emma said, testing the name, "our little Thomas." The baby stopped crying at the sound of her voice, and Emma smiled through her tears. "Welcome to the world, little one. You are so loved." The first months of Thomas's life were sleepless and chaotic and absolutely wonderful. Cole discovered that he loved being a father, loved watching his son grow and change every day. Emma bloomed in motherhood, her earlier fears about being able to love another child proving completely unfounded. Little Thomas was adored beyond measure by both his parents. The homestead continued to grow and prosper. With the help of a baby tied to her back in a carrier Cole made, Emma managed to keep up with her work. Cole divided his time between the ranch, the homestead, and caring for his family. They were exhausted all the time, but it was the good kind of tired, the kind that came from building something meaningful. When Thomas was 6 months old, Cole came home from the Anchor Ranch with news that changed everything. "The ranch is being sold," he announced as he walked into the cabin. "The owner is retiring, moving back east. He is selling the whole operation to a syndicate from California." Emma looked up from where she was nursing the baby, alarmed. "What does that mean for you? Will you still have work?" "I do not know yet," Cole admitted. "The new owners might keep the current hands-on, or they might bring in their own people. Hank says we will know more in a few weeks." The uncertainty was stressful, but it also forced them to have conversations they had been putting off. They sat together that night after Thomas was asleep, talking seriously about their future. "If you lose the ranch job, we can make it work," Emma said. "We are bringing in more money from the eggs and my preserves than we used to. If we are careful, if we tighten our belts, we can survive on just what the homestead produces." "It will be tight," Cole said. "But I think you are right. And Emma, I have been thinking, if I do lose this job, maybe it is a blessing. Maybe it is time to focus entirely on building our own operation, making this place truly ours." "You would not miss the steady paycheck." "I would miss the security," Cole admitted. "But I would not miss being away from you and Thomas 3 days a week. I would not miss working to build someone else's dream instead of our own." They decided that whatever happened with the ranch sale, they would be all right. They had survived worse together. They would survive this too. As it turned out, the new owners of the Anchor Ranch did keep most of the existing hands-on, including Cole. But the offer came with changes that Cole was not willing to accept. The new management wanted everyone working 6 days a week with reduced pay. They wanted to cut back on the quality of care for the animals, prioritizing profit over good ranching. It was everything Cole hated about the business side of cattle operations. He quit. Emma was terrified when he came home and told her, but she supported his decision. "We will figure it out," she said firmly. "We always do." And they did. The next year was the hardest they had faced since the early days of their relationship. Money was painfully tight. They grew or raised almost everything they ate, and every penny they earned went back into the homestead or necessities. But slowly, painfully slowly, the operation began to support them. Cole's knowledge and Emma's fierce work ethic combined to create something special. Their eggs became known throughout the area for their quality. Emma's preserves and butter earned a reputation for excellence. They bought a milk cow and started selling cream and cheese as well. By the time Thomas was 2 years old, the homestead was finally, truly theirs in a way it had never been before. They were not rich, not even comfortable by most standards, but they were making it. They were surviving and even occasionally thriving on their own terms. Emma got pregnant again in the summer of 1885. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she was not dealing with grief and trauma alongside the physical demands. Cole was attentive and worried, remembering how difficult Thomas's birth had been, but Emma felt strong and capable. Their daughter was born in March of 1886, a chilly morning with rain pattering on the roof. She came quickly, much faster than Thomas had, and Emma handled the labor with a calm competence that amazed the midwife. When Cole held his daughter for the first time, looking down at her tiny face and shock of blonde hair, he felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. "What shall we call her?" he asked Emma, who was looking remarkably alert for someone who had just given birth. "Grace," Emma said without hesitation. "Grace Elizabeth, because she is a gift of grace and because we need to remember grace in our lives." "Grace Elizabeth Brennan," Cole said, smiling down at his daughter. "It is perfect, she is perfect." Thomas, now 2.5, was initially suspicious of the tiny interloper who had claimed his mother's attention. But Cole made sure to include him in everything, showing him how to be gentle with his baby sister, praising him for being a good big brother. Within weeks, Thomas was fiercely protective of Grace, and Cole and Emma would often find him sitting beside her cradle, singing to her in his toddler voice. Life settled into a new rhythm. The work was endless, but it was good work, meaningful work. Emma and Cole had created something strong and lasting together, a home and a family and a future. They were no longer struggling just to survive. They were building something that would outlast them. The homestead continued to grow. When Thomas was 5 and Grace was 3, Cole bought more land from a neighbor who was retiring, expanding their property significantly. They increased their livestock, adding more cattle and even a few sheep. Emma experimented with different crops, finding that alfalfa grew well on their land and provided good fodder for the animals. They were not rich, but they were secure in a way Emma had never imagined possible during those dark days after Thomas Richardson died. She would sometimes stand on her porch, watching Cole work in the fields while their children played nearby, and feel overwhelmed with gratitude for the life they had built. One evening when Grace was 4 years old, Emma and Cole were sitting on the porch after the children had gone to bed, enjoying the cool night air. Emma took Cole's hand and said, "Do you remember when we met? When I was too proud to ask for help and you left supplies at my door?" "I remember," Cole said, squeezing her hand. "You were the stubbornest woman I had ever met." "I was terrified," Emma admitted. "Terrified of being weak, terrified of needing anyone. I thought if I admitted I could not do it alone, that meant I had failed somehow." "And now?" Cole asked. "Now I know that needing people is not weakness. Love is not weakness. Letting you help me, letting myself love you was the strongest thing I ever did." She turned to look at him, her eyes shining in the lamplight spilling from the cabin. "You saved my life, Cole. Not just by leaving those supplies, but by seeing me, really seeing me. You saw my pride and my strength, and instead of trying to break them down, you worked around them until I was ready to let you in." Cole pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "You saved my life too, Emma." I was drifting, going nowhere, belonging nowhere. You gave me a home and a purpose and a family. You gave me everything." They sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the desert, the distant howl of coyotes and the whisper of wind through the grass. Inside the cabin, their children slept safe and sound. Around them, the homestead they had built together stood strong. Emma thought about the woman she had been when she first met Cole, brittle with pride and barely holding on. She thought about how terrified she had been to accept help, to admit she needed anyone. And she thought about the journey that had brought her here, to this porch with this man, surrounded by the life they had created together. "I love you," she said softly. "I do not say it enough, but I love you more than I can express." "I love you too," Cole said. Every day more than the day before, they had faced so much together. Poverty and illness, uncertainty and struggle, the judgment of others and their own internal battles. They had built a home from almost nothing, created a family, forged a partnership that was stronger than either of them alone. It had not been easy. There had been days when Emma wondered if they would make it, times when the challenges seemed insurmountable, but they had made it. They were making it still, day by day, season by season, year by year. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the land and the animals as much as his parents did. He followed Cole everywhere, learning to rope and ride, absorbing everything his father taught him about ranching and hard work and doing things right. Grace was quieter, more thoughtful, but no less determined. She helped Emma in the garden and the kitchen, learning to preserve food and manage a household, but she also insisted on learning to ride and work cattle like her brother. When Thomas turned 12 and Grace turned 10, the homestead was thriving in ways Emma had never dreamed possible. They had a solid herd of cattle, a thriving flock of chickens, 2 milk cows, pigs, and a large vegetable garden that produced more than they could use. Cole had built a proper barn and expanded the cabin to include 2 bedrooms for the children and a larger kitchen for Emma. They had even managed to save money, building a cushion against disaster that gave them security they had never had before. But more than the material success, they had built something intangible and invaluable. They had created a family defined by love and mutual respect, by hard work and shared purpose. Thomas and Grace grew up watching their parents work as partners, seeing them face challenges together, witnessing the kind of love that endured through difficulty. The lessons they learned would shape them for the rest of their lives. Emma and Cole were in their 40s now, weathered by years of hard work under the southwestern sun, but still strong, still in love, still building their life together. They had grown old together in the best way, their love deepening and maturing with time. One evening, as they celebrated Thomas's 14th birthday with a special dinner, Emma looked around her table at her family and felt her heart overflow. Thomas was already taller than her, broad-shouldered and strong, looking more like his father every day. Grace was turning into a beautiful young woman, smart and capable and full of dreams. And Cole, her Cole, sat at the head of the table with a smile on his weathered face, gray threading through his dark hair, his gray eyes still bright when they met hers. This was what she had fought for during those desperate months after Thomas Richardson died. This was what she had been too proud to think she deserved. This life, this love, this family. After dinner, after the children had gone to bed and the cabin was quiet, Emma and Cole walked out to Thomas Richardson's grave on the hillside. They visited it sometimes, especially on special occasions, to remember and to honor the man who had first loved Emma, who had built the foundation that made everything else possible. Emma knelt and placed wildflowers on the grave as she did every spring. "We named our son for you," she said softly, as if Thomas could hear her. "He is a good boy, strong and kind. I think you would have liked him. I think you would have liked all of this." Cole stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. He felt no jealousy toward the man buried here. Thomas Richardson had loved Emma and built a home for her, and that deserved respect and remembrance. Cole's life with Emma was possible because of what Thomas had started. "Thank you," Emma whispered to the grave. "For loving me, for building this place, for giving me a foundation to build on. I will never forget you." They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, the stars blazing overhead in the clear desert night. Inside, their children slept, dreaming of their own futures. Around them, the homestead stood strong, a testament to perseverance and love and the courage to accept help when it was offered. Emma thought about the woman she had been, refusing to beg for help, too proud to admit she was drowning. She thought about Cole, quietly leaving supplies at her door, respecting her pride while refusing to let her suffer. She thought about the journey that had brought them from those desperate early days to this moment of peace and prosperity. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not left those supplies?" Emma asked as they prepared for bed. "If you had just let me struggle on alone," Cole considered the question seriously. "I think you would have survived somehow. You are too strong to give up." "But I do not think either of us would have been as happy." "No," Emma agreed. "We were meant to find each other. We were meant to build this life together." She climbed into bed beside her husband, fitting herself against him in the way they had perfected over years of sleeping side by side. Cole's arm came around her, holding her close, and Emma closed her eyes with a sense of profound contentment. Tomorrow there would be work to do, as there always was. The cattle would need tending, the garden would need weeding, there would be meals to prepare and children to care for, and 100 other tasks that made up their daily life. But they would face it all together, as they had faced everything for years now. Emma drifted toward sleep, warm and safe and loved, and her last thought before dreams claimed her was of gratitude. Gratitude for the man who had seen her pride and found a way to help her without breaking it. Gratitude for the life they had built together. Gratitude for the children they had created and the love they shared. She had been so afraid of needing anyone, so terrified of being weak. But in the end, letting herself need Cole, letting herself love him and be loved by him, had been the bravest and best thing she had ever done. The years continued to unfold with the steady rhythm of life on the homestead. Thomas grew into a fine young man, tall and strong and reliable, his father's son in every way that mattered. When he was 18, he started courting a girl from town, the daughter of the feed store owner, and Emma saw in his eyes the same look Cole had once given her. The look of a man who had found something worth staying for. Grace, at 16, was independent and clever, helping Emma run the household with increasing competence while also proving herself as capable as any man at working the land. She had inherited her mother's fierce pride and her father's quiet strength, and Emma knew that whatever path she chose in life, she would be just fine. Cole and Emma were in their late 40s now, their hair graying, their bodies bearing the marks of decades of hard work. But they were healthy and strong, still working the homestead side by side, still deeply in love. They had weathered everything life threw at them and emerged stronger for it. One spring morning, Emma woke before dawn and slipped out of bed carefully so as not to wake Cole. She made coffee and carried her cup out to the porch, watching the sun rise over the land they had worked so hard to build. The desert was coming alive with color as spring flowers bloomed, and the air was cool and sweet. Cole joined her a few minutes later, his own coffee in hand, and they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the day begin. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked eventually. "Everything," Emma said with a soft smile. "How far we have come. How different things are now from those first desperate days." "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked. "Staying here, building this life, it has been hard sometimes." "Never," Emma said without hesitation. "This is where I belong, with you, with our children on this land. This is my home in a way nowhere else has ever been." Cole nodded, understanding completely. "Mine too. I spent so many years wandering, never belonging anywhere, and then I found you and suddenly I had a reason to stay. The best reason." Emma leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They had been married for over 15 years now, and the love between them had only grown deeper and richer with time. They had learned each other completely, knew each other's moods and thoughts and dreams. They were partners in the truest sense of the word. "I never properly thanked you," Emma said suddenly. "For what you did, leaving those supplies, helping me when I was too proud to ask. You saved my life, Cole. You thanked me by building this life with me," Cole said. "By loving me, by giving me a home and a family. That is all the thanks I ever needed." "Still," Emma insisted, "I want you to know that I understand now what a gift you gave me. Not just the supplies, but the way you gave them. You saw what I needed, not just materially, but emotionally. You understood that I needed to keep my pride even while accepting help. That took wisdom and kindness and patience." "I saw someone worth saving," Cole said simply. "Someone strong and brave who was facing impossible circumstances. I did what anyone should have done." "But most people did not do it," Emma pointed out. "They offered help in ways that felt like pity, or they judged me for not accepting it. You found a way to help without making me feel small. That made all the difference." They watched the sun climb higher in the sky, painting the desert in shades of gold and orange. Around them, the homestead was waking up. They could hear the chickens clucking, the cattle lowing, the familiar sounds of the life they had created. "We should start breakfast," Emma said eventually. "Grace will be up soon, and Thomas said he would come by today to help with the fencing." "In a minute," Cole said, pulling her closer. "I just want to stand here with you a little longer." Emma smiled and relaxed against him, in no hurry to move. These moments were precious, quiet times when they could simply be together without the demands of work pulling them in different directions. They had learned to treasure them. Eventually, they did go inside to start the day. But as Emma worked in her kitchen, preparing breakfast for her family, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the life she had been given. It had not been the life she planned. She had not expected to be a widow at 24, had not imagined she would remarry and have children with someone else. But this life, this unexpected, hard-won, beautiful life, was better than anything she could have planned. Cole came up behind her and kissed the back of her neck, a casual gesture of affection that still made her heart flutter after all these years. "I love you," he said, as he did every morning. "I love you too," Emma replied, as she always did. It was a simple exchange, words they had said to each other thousands of times, but they never lost their meaning, never became empty ritual. Every time Emma said those words, she meant them with her whole heart. Every time Cole said them, Emma felt loved and cherished and secure. Thomas and Grace came down for breakfast, filling the kitchen with their energy and conversation. They talked about the work planned for the day, about Grace's upcoming birthday, about Thomas's plans to propose to his sweetheart. It was ordinary family talk, the kind that happened around countless breakfast tables every morning, but to Emma and Cole, it was extraordinary. It was proof that they had succeeded in building something lasting and good. Their children were happy and healthy, growing into fine adults. Their home was strong and stable. Their love had endured through every challenge and grown stronger for it. After breakfast, they all went out to start the day's work. Emma tended to the garden and the chickens. Grace helped her, talking about her dreams for the future. Cole and Thomas worked on the fencing, stringing new wire and replacing rotted posts. It was hard work, sweaty and exhausting, but satisfying in the way that physical labor can be when you are building something that matters. At midday, they all gathered for lunch, washing up at the pump behind the house before sitting down to the meal Emma had prepared. They talked and laughed, enjoying the break from work, strengthened by food and family. In the afternoon, Emma took a break to do some mending on the porch, where she could watch her family work. Cole and Thomas moved with the easy coordination of people who had worked together for years. Grace was in the garden, singing softly to herself as she weeded. The sun was warm but not oppressive, a perfect spring day. Emma felt tears prick her eyes as she watched them. She had come so close to losing all of this before it even began. If Cole had not intervened, if he had not quietly helped her through those desperate months, she would have lost the homestead. She might have died from the illness that struck her, alone and with no one to care for her. She certainly would never have experienced this life, this love, this family. Pride had almost cost her everything, but Cole's quiet compassion had saved her, had given her the help she needed in a way she could accept. He had seen past her stubborn independence to the desperate need beneath, and he had responded with wisdom and kindness. That was love, Emma realized. Real love, not just the passion and romance, though they had that too, but the everyday kindness, the patience, the willingness to help without expectation of reward or recognition. Cole had loved her before she even knew he existed, leaving supplies in the dark hours before dawn, asking nothing in return. And Emma had learned to love him by learning to let him help her, by slowly letting down the walls around her heart, by accepting that needing someone did not make her weak. It made her human. That evening, after the work was done and Thomas had headed home to his own place, the family gathered for dinner. Emma had made a special meal, roast chicken with vegetables from the garden and a pie made with dried apples. They ate together, talking about everything and nothing, enjoying the simple pleasure of being together. After Grace went to bed, Emma and Cole sat together on the porch as they did most evenings, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The desert night was cool and peaceful, with just the whisper of wind and the distant howl of coyotes to break the silence. "Do you remember what you said to me the night you proposed?" Emma asked suddenly. "You said you wanted to build something good and true. Do you think we did that?" Cole looked around at the homestead, the sturdy buildings and productive land, then back at Emma. "Yes," he said firmly. "We built something better than I ever dreamed possible. We built a home, a family, a life worth living. We built it together and it is good and true." Emma nodded, satisfied. "I think so too. I think we have done well, you and I." "Better than well," Cole said, taking her hand. "Emma, these years with you have been the best of my life. You have made me happier than I ever thought I could be. You have given me everything that matters." "You gave me everything too," Emma said softly. "You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I would never love again. You gave me a reason to keep fighting, to keep holding on, and you did it without taking away my pride or my independence. You let me be strong even while supporting me. That is a rare gift." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, hands clasped, watching the night deepen around them. Emma thought about all the years that had passed since that first desperate summer, about everything they had endured and accomplished together. She thought about the supplies that had appeared on her doorstep like magic, about the mysterious benefactor she had been too proud to seek out, about the moment when she finally understood that accepting help was not weakness but wisdom. "I hope our children learn from us," Emma said eventually. "I hope they learn that pride is not worth suffering for. I hope they learn to accept help when they need it and to offer it when they see someone struggling. I hope they learn that love is about partnership and support, not about being strong enough to do everything alone." "They are learning," Cole assured her. "Thomas is already like that, always helping his neighbors, always looking out for people who need it. And Grace has your fierce independence, but she also knows when to ask for help. We are raising good children, Emma. They will be fine." Emma smiled, reassured. "Yes, they will be fine. We have given them a good foundation." As the night grew later, they finally went inside to bed. Emma changed into her nightgown while Cole banked the fire and checked that the doors were secure. It was a routine they had followed for years, comfortable and familiar. In bed, Emma curled against Cole's side, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her. This too was familiar, their bodies knowing exactly how to fit together after so many years. "Cole," Emma said softly into the darkness. Thank you for everything, for seeing me when I needed to be seen, for helping me when I was too proud to ask, for loving me even when I made it difficult, for building this life with me. Just thank you." Cole kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for letting me. Thank you for taking a chance on a drifting cowboy with nothing to offer but hard work and love. Thank you for making me a home and a family. Thank you for every day we have had together." Emma felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "I love you so much. I love you too." "Forever, Emma, forever." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. They had survived so much already. They had built something lasting and strong. And they had done it through love and stubbornness and the willingness to accept help when it was offered. Emma's last thought before sleep claimed her was that she was the luckiest woman alive. She had known great loss and great hardship, but she had also known great love. She had a partner who saw her strength and supported her weakness. She had children who would carry on what she and Cole had built. She had a home that was truly hers, earned through sweat and determination and the courage to let someone help her. She had been so afraid once, so determined to do everything alone. But Cole had shown her a different way. He had shown her that accepting help with grace was its own form of strength, that loving and being loved was the bravest thing anyone could do, and Emma had learned the lesson. She had let down her walls and opened her heart, and she had been rewarded with a love that sustained her through everything, with a partner who made every burden lighter and every joy sweeter. As she drifted into dreams, Emma smiled. Tomorrow there would be work to do, as there always was. But she would not face it alone. She never had to face anything alone anymore. She had Cole, and together they could handle anything life threw at them. That knowledge, that certainty, was the greatest gift of all. Greater than the supplies that had appeared on her doorstep. Greater than the repairs Cole had made or the money his help had saved her. The greatest gift was knowing she was not alone, that she was loved completely and without reservation, that she had a partner who would stand beside her through whatever came. Emma had learned to accept help, and in doing so, she had gained everything. She had gained a husband and children and a beautiful life. She had gained happiness and security and love that would last the rest of her days. And it had all started with a cowboy who saw her pride and quietly left supplies at her door, respecting her strength while refusing to let her suffer. Cole had seen what she needed before she could admit it herself, and he had provided it with a grace and discretion that allowed her to accept it. That was love. Real, lasting, beautiful love, and Emma fell asleep grateful beyond measure that she had been blessed enough to find it.